All right, now I have kind of my idea kind of worked out, but you want to look for problems in your design. So various problems can come up, and one of those is its readability. So you want to make sure that your logo is not just clear, direct, and simple, kind of as simple as it can be, to still be your own version of the idea, and versatile. You also want to avoid things like needless detail, and something in design that's really important, which is when things are uncomfortably close to each other or touching each other, something called tangency. And so when I look at my design, everything's kind of flowing nicely. The center of the design is right there. And so I have this nice kind of S curve that goes in and out of that center line. But this area here, this area feels too uncomfortably close. And that shape are too similar. So though it works really well on this side proportion-wise, and I like that negative space that's being created, it's like another leaf in and of itself, I'm not loving this one. So I need to work with that. And there's only a few ways you can work with tangencies. You have to alter the elements, right? So either I alter this leaf, and let me do that first by combining these together, making a duplicate to work with. So one thing I can do is I can just get rid of it. And see how it works on both sides without it. Again, taking away, simplifying, asking these questions. But then this just looks too needlessly decorative. It doesn't add substance. So if I have it added in, whoops, what happened there? What can I do next to mess with it? Maybe I can shrink them. I can always back it away. And then the other option is to overlap them. But overlapping them, which might work in an illustration, I don't think would work here. So I can warp it down a little bit. Let's see if I like that shape. Yeah, that negative space is working a little bit better for me. I could clean up that curve in Illustrator, or I can do it right now. The reason we cover compositing first in this class, before we get into Illustrator and creating our own, is because it can help you make so many little alterations that are helpful to your finished work. So now that curve kind of flows through a little bit better. And I like that. So that shape works better. Now, do I want that on both sides? Yes, I think I do. So instead of trying to make all those same adjustments to this leaf, I simply use what I know about compositing again. Duplicate it. Duplicate it again. Flip it horizontally. Hold down Shift. And move it. And see how it works. And that I feel stronger about. This is obviously what's dominant. but these kind of make it into a stronger silhouette, and it works. And I think they kind of tie this better into a leaf rather than into just flames. So it's about kind of all life being sacred and celebrated, and that works for an Earth Day theme. All right, so now I have my sketch. What's next? Well, the first thing you're going to upload is your sketch, kind of your most refined version of your sketch. So I'm going to save it as a TIFF in case I want to make other alterations, and then I'm just going to crop it a little bit closer to save space. Give myself a lot of space around it. And now I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Let me flatten it. I'm going to save this as a different name because this will be the first thing I turn in. So I'm going to call this Carl Assignment 6 Sketch. And it's going to be a JPEG to the desktop. Okay, now I can actually make this a little bit cleaner. I have the pencil lines, I have the paper, and all that's fine, but to see it kind of clearly in Illustrator, I can always just do a quick levels adjustment, especially if you're using kind of the computer camera to take your pictures instead of scanning it. You'll want to do a little bit of this cleaning in levels, making your lines fairly clear. Even though I do a lot on the computer, I like to sketch logo designs by hand first with pencil, and then I have to make stronger decisions in Illustrator about the width of the line because a pencil is soft, and so I have all of this kind of range in between. I don't need to make a final decision, and I like to do that on top of the project. So if that's my sketch, I will save that. Now I'm going to leave Photoshop. And I'm going to use that sketch to continue the process in Illustrator. So once you have refined and finished your sketch, it doesn't mean it's a clean, finished piece. It means it's a good start. Now before we played with Illustrator with this little test file, I like to have that open so I can try different things out there. But now when you open up a JPEG in Illustrator, you just right-click and you say Open with Illustrator. It comes in as not a vector. It comes in as what's called a raster file. And as soon as you click on that raster file, it will ask you if you want to trace it. And you could try to trace it, but that's not what we're going to be doing for this. I'm going to show you how I draw on top of it. But just to show you how this can work. So let's say you did a really clean logo. I might say, okay, I want this to be a silhouette or a black and white logo. And it will do what it can to translate my pencil sketch into individual vector shapes. Now, as you can see, it didn't do a very good job. I lost a lot. But you can always use the little settings here, especially the advanced settings, to really customize this. So the first is threshold. And I could allow, more and more of those gray pixels to be translatable as vector shapes. And then I can use these advanced settings to say I want fewer paths, which will make the shapes less and less complicated. It's just previewing it as I go. So for instance, it does a beautiful job right there, but then it gets a little messy other places. I could say I want fewer corners overall, but that might make things a little loopy. But again, it's about simplifying it. And then the noise, let's see what that does. Taking noise away. It's kind of the little grains at the side. How much do you want to allow? If I allow a lot of noise or if I don't allow much at all. I can also tell it to ignore the white, so it's just the black shapes. Now, taking my pencil sketch, notice that even the leaves, which were exact copies of each other, don't match in what's called live tracing, in vectorizing my sketch. Though these leaves match pretty well, they don't match exactly, because this is an imperfect system. And if I like it, I can say expand. And that will turn it into vectors. Vectors which I can then modify. So for instance, I can redraw them just like I would if I created the vectors myself. And I can use the pencil tool to redraw them. But I would spend so much time fixing what I have that I don't think that's the way to go with this. Because I'm going for a clean, simple logo. So instead of doing all of that, which we'll be learning more about later, I'm going to use Command Z and go backwards to before I tried to live trace it, when it was just a sketch. Or at this point, I could just open it again. Or how about I do this? I'm going to save this as a vector, as a test. Call it a live trace test of my sketch. This is not something you have to do. This is optional. And I'm going to save it as an EPS file so I can look at it easily later in desktop. The two types of Illustrator files we're going to use, AI is for working files, EPS is for when you're finished with your vector and you want to bring it into other programs like Photoshop. Okay, use all the default settings. All right, now I'm going to open the sketch again and show you how we can actually make our own shapes instead of just having Illustrator trace them for us. First thing I want to do is make sure I understand how layers work. So I'm going to get off of image trace simply by making a new layer on top of my old layer. And I'm going to lock my sketch layer so I can't accidentally change it or affect it. Now in my new layer on top, I can start making my shapes, my lines, just like we did when we were playing here. Now, I am going to use paths that I fill with black. So I want a black fill. And I don't want any stroke, so I'm going to X that out. So there's no stroke at all. And I could try it with the pencil tool. And this is kind of like digital inking. Lasso around the shape. Until I get to the end, and you'll see the little circle next to the pencil. That means it's completing the path. And then I can fill that in with black. Why will it not let me? Let me see. There we go. And because I use the pencil tool, you see it's pretty smooth. It's not perfect, but that works pretty well. I love the pencil tool. It's probably my favorite tool in Illustrator. But sometimes you have to edit it. So I go back to the pencil tool and I first have to select the shape I just drew on my layer. And so I can do that a few ways. I can hold down Command and change the pencil tool to the small selection tool, which allows me to select that path. Or if I select somewhere else, I can just select on that path within the layer. Once it's selected, I can then redraw parts of it. And it's like cutting out paper with the added benefit of being able to add more paper onto it if you change your mind. Now the only problem with the pencil tool is sometimes you'll get extra bumps you don't need. And that's when you can use the smooth tool, which is under the pencil tool, and you just kind of redraw over a selection, and it will smooth it out for you. It will take away extra anchor points that aren't needed.